Officer Rick Donnelly swaggered into the cramped Maricopa County courtroom the way some men shove into an elevator, certain the world will make space. He was a veteran cop in his late 40s, pale-skinned, broad-chested, and smug about the badge glinting at his chest. The defendant's table, by contrast, looked almost fragile. Naomi Brooks, 17, black, honors student, daughter of a night shift nurse, sat alone in a thrift store navy blazer and scuffed flats. Her hair was gathered into a neat puff at the nape of her neck, glasses sliding down a determined nose. She clutched a 3-inch binder the way a knight grips a shield. No attorney flanked her, no friendly paralegal whispered cues. Still, when Judge Raymond Keyes asked whether she would be representing herself, Naomi's yes rang through the stuffy room with the calm steadiness of someone who had already rehearsed this moment in the mirror 100 times. Donnelly's laugh skittered across the linoleum like a dropped coin. He leaned back, arms folded, and muttered, "This'll be over before my coffee gets cold." The bailiff cleared his throat in warning, but Donnelly just flashed that thin smile older women recognize from boys who never learned respect. Naomi did not flinch. She placed her binder on the worn oak, flipped it open to a tab marked Status, and waited. The hum of a dusty ceiling fan mixed with the scratch of the clerk's pen. Even those small sounds felt suddenly disrespectful, like talking during prayer. Behind Naomi, her mother Patrice sat stone still, hands clasped, lips moving in a silent plea. She had begged her daughter to accept a plea deal, frightened by the stakes, but Naomi had refused. The plea meant admitting guilt. Guilt meant the story would die in a file cabinet instead of being brought into the light. The story began 4 weeks earlier under the merciless Phoenix sun. School had just let out at Roosevelt High, and kids spilled onto the sidewalk the way water splits around a stone. Naomi was scrolling a group project chat when she heard an argument near the baseball fence. Her classmate D'Angelo Ruiz, loud, funny, chronically late to algebra but no threat to anyone, was backed against chain link while a security guard jabbed a finger at his chest over a busted locker. Naomi lifted her phone and hit record, because adults treated East Side kids differently when a camera stared back. Moments later, Donnelly, summoned for backup, barreled in. He never asked a question, never read the room. He yanked D'Angelo by the arm, slammed him against the metal, and when the frightened teenager instinctively jerked away, Donnelly shoved harder. The heat made the fence hiss. D'Angelo's cheek burned crimson where metal kissed skin. Naomi stepped forward. She did not curse, did not touch anyone. She said, loud enough for every phone in range to capture, "Officer, that's excessive force." Donnelly's sunglasses reflected her own wide eyes back at her. "Back up," he barked. "Now." She replied, "I'm recording. The Constitution protects my right." He spat the words back, mocking, "You know your rights." Then he strode toward her, ripped the phone from her hand, twisted her arms behind her back, and snarled for the body cam, "Obstruction of justice." As he cuffed her, a few kids gasped and raised their own phones, but fear kept them rooted. Naomi spent the next 6 hours in a fluorescent holding cell while paperwork labeled her a criminal. Most teenagers would have spent the following days crying or ranting on social media. Naomi did neither. She logged off Instagram, borrowed case files from a cousin who worked at a legal clinic in Flagstaff, and devoured them like someone cramming for salvation. She watched Arizona appellate hearings at 3 in the morning, scribbled definitions of probable cause and qualified immunity on post-its, and color-coded every inconsistency in Donnelly's report. She noted that he never mentioned D'Angelo struggling until after Naomi began filming. She highlighted that his body cam malfunctioned the moment he grabbed her phone. Patrice worked doubles at the VA hospital, leaving sleepy encouragements on sticky notes. "Eat breakfast, baby." Yet worrying her daughter was too stubborn to survive the system. Naomi only answered, "I'm not the one who should be afraid." Now, in court, the prosecution opened with a brisk outline. Naomi interfered with a lawful arrest, created a public disturbance, endangered an officer's safety. Donnelly testified first. He described Roosevelt High as a hotbed of gang activity, emphasized Naomi's aggressive posture, and swore he feared for crowd control. His tone dripped the weary patience of a man forced to explain civilization to the uncivilized. More than one white juror nodded along. Naomi's cross-examination was the moment everyone expected her to stumble. Instead, she rose, smoothed her blazer, and asked Donnelly to read aloud the Phoenix PD's own use of force guidelines. Her voice stayed low and even, but every question sliced. She made him admit no weapon was visible, no threat verbalized, and that D'Angelo was unarmed, 5'6", and weighed maybe 130 pounds. She slid a still frame from her phone video onto the evidence screen, Donnelly's hand gripping D'Angelo's neck. "Is that your arm or someone else's, officer?" she asked. The court reporter paused, eyes wide, as Donnelly's face reddened. Then Naomi played the 30-second clip the media had ignored. The grainy footage showed her calmly stating, "I'm recording," followed by Donnelly lunging forward and the sickening crunch of her shoulder against a cruiser door. In slow motion, you could see her phone sail upward, screen shattering on asphalt. The courtroom held its breath. Naomi clicked pause. "Obstruction of justice requires intent to hinder an investigation," she said, quoting statute by memory. What investigation existed before Officer Donnelly initiated physical force? Silence swelled, oppressive, until the judge cleared his throat. Patrice's shoulders shook with quiet sobs. Not of fear this time, but of fierce, swollen pride. Naomi was not finished. She called Mr. Kirkwood her history teacher, who testified that Naomi was president of the debate team, that she volunteered at the public library, that the school had no record of campus violence that day. She submitted authenticated medical photos of bruises on D'Angelo's ribs and her own wrists, each labeled with date and time. She cited federal precedent, Ford v. City of Detroit 6th Circuit 2022, to argue civilians have a First Amendment right to film police in public. Every citation hit like a hammer in Donnelly's polished narrative. By mid-afternoon, Donnelly's earlier smirk was gone. Sweat beaded at his temples. Naomi closed her binder with finality. "Your Honor," she said, "I move to dismiss all charges pursuant to Rule 20.1 for lack of prima facie evidence." The judge's brows lifted. A hush rippled among spectators who had come expecting quick justice, the kind that favors uniforms. He recessed for 10 minutes to review the motion. Donnelly tried to meet Naomi's gaze, maybe to intimidate, but she simply adjusted her glasses and looked through him as though calculating the distance between this moment and the news cameras she intended to summon. 10 minutes later, the judge returned, eyes grave. He granted the motion. Case dismissed. Gasps burst like fireworks. Patrice covered her mouth. Mr. Kirkwood pumped a triumphant fist. Donnelly scowled, but the final blow waited outside. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones gleaming. Naomi stepped into a patch of sunlight, binder tucked under one arm, and announced she would file a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Donnelly and the Phoenix Police Department. She demanded disciplinary action, mandatory body cam audits, and the creation of a community oversight board. Her voice never wavered. For every woman who had ever been told to hush, for every kid cuffed for the sin of witnessing, she spoke with the force of desert thunder. Somewhere in the back of the crowd, D'Angelo raised his phone and hit record. This time, the whole world would be watching. Naomi Brooks stared at her reflection and noticed how easy it would be to let anger slip into her words. She knew that if she sounded furious, people would stop listening, especially a jury conditioned to see a young black woman as volatile. Instead, she practiced calm. She rehearsed in front of mirrors, in the kitchen while her mother washed dishes, even on her front porch beside two teenagers who usually ignored her. She repeated what the legal aid counselor had said, "Sound certain, not smart." Those words sat on a neon green sticky note atop her binder, glowing like a beacon whenever doubt threatened to creep in. The afternoon Naomi called the legal aid hotline for the second time, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. She asked specifically about filing complaints for excessive force. The counselor, a weary but kind woman named Jeanette, chuckled softly when Naomi admitted she was her own lawyer. Jeanette walked her through the statutes the district attorney would lean on and warned her how judges treated teens without attorneys. "Do not try to sound smart," Jeanette said again. "Try to sound certain." Naomi thanked her and tucked that advice into her heart, ready to wield certainty like a shield. People began to notice Naomi's determination. Her history teacher, Mr. Kirkwood, offered to serve as a character witness and praised her discipline in front of classmates. who once saw her as just another honor roll kid. Her cousin's girlfriend, a paralegal in Flagstaff, emailed her detailed guides on structuring cross-examinations. Even the school janitor, Mr. LaRue, handed over the battered legal dictionary he'd carried since his night classes 20 years ago. None of them patted her on the head or offered pity. They simply respected her resolve, and that quiet support warmed Naomi's heart more than any sympathy ever could. Meanwhile, Officer Rick Donnelly went through his day believing this would be a short, routine hearing. A 17-year-old without legal training arguing her own case? He expected to rattle off a few legal buzzwords, maybe flash a badge or two, and walk out with another conviction. He did not see the months of midnight research, the hours of courtroom videos burned into Naomi's memory, or the flash of determination in her eyes when she spoke statistics with the clarity of a seasoned attorney. When the trial began, the courtroom felt charged. The back rows were filled now, teachers from Roosevelt High, D'Angelo Ruiz and his mother, a curious reporter from the Arizona Daily Sun tapping notes on her notepad. The judge, Raymond Keyes, entered, and Naomi sat up straighter. The prosecutor opened with a formal tone, labeling Naomi as disruptive, accusing her of disrespect and escalation. Donnelly sat behind her, arms folded, offering smug half-smiles that barely concealed his confidence. But confidence can crack like thin ice when it meets the weight of truth. Naomi rose for her opening statement. Her heart pounded, but her voice was clear. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the court, I am not a lawyer and I won't pretend to be one. What I do know is what I saw and what I lived." She returned to her table, simple and direct. The judge inclined his head, acknowledging her presence, as though impressed that a teenager could stand so composed in the face of years of authority. The real turning point began with Naomi's cross-examination of Donnelly. "Officer Donnelly, how long have you served with the Phoenix Police Department?" she asked. 17 years, he replied. "In those 17 years, how many times have you arrested a student for obstruction without any physical altercation?" Naomi pressed on, standing that D'Angelo was unarmed, standing at least 12 feet away, and weighed only about 135 pounds. She held up a still frame showing Donnelly's hand gripping D'Angelo's neck. "Is that your arm, sir?" she asked plainly. His face flushed, and the courtroom shifted in its seats as jurors exchanged glances. Prosecution witnesses offered little defense after that. A school security guard admitted she barely noticed who recorded the incident, and a student testified they were distracted by their phone. Then, Naomi called Mr. Kirkwood, who described her as the go-to student for help, someone never prone to impulsive actions. D'Angelo took the stand next. His voice trembled as he said, "Naomi was just asking questions. She didn't touch Officer Donnelly." The judge nodded, the student's honesty echoing like a bell in a quiet hall. Then came the video evidence. Naomi asked the judge to play the footage from her phone. The crackle of the audio gave way to the clear sound of Donnelly's barked orders and Naomi's calm, measured voice saying, "I'm recording this." The camera shook as Donnelly lunged, and Naomi's phone flew through the air, screen shattering on hot asphalt. The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge leaned back, absorbing every frame and every heart-stopping thud. That was the moment when Donnelly's veneer of invincibility cracked. Naomi didn't stop there. She had an expert witness from Northern Arizona University confirm the video's timestamps, proving she never moved closer to Donnelly. When the prosecutor objected, the judge sustained her right to rebuttal. Naomi watched as Donnelly's credibility crumbled, his practiced tone faltering. Finally, she dropped her last blow. She asked the court to consider the 3 previous complaints filed against Officer Donnelly over the past 5 years. Complaints from a gas station clerk, a parent at Dunbar Elementary, and a man detained during a traffic stop. The judge's eyebrows rose, and the courtroom buzzed with a new tension. Naomi Brooks sat back, calm and certain, knowing she had forced the truth into the light once more. Naomi Brooks felt the air shift in the courtroom the moment Judge Keyes recessed. The tiny murmur of reactions from jurors told her Officer Donnelly no longer held the room. She watched him, once so certain in his uniform, shrink under the weight of her questions. He had sneered when she spoke, mocked her youth and her questioning voice, but now his smirk was gone. Naomi sat still, hands resting on her binder like a shield, daring him to speak again. When the trial resumed, the judge's tone carried a new gravity. "I have reviewed the footage and considered the testimony," he said, and Naomi's heart slowed. Her calm presentation, her sharp cross-examination, and the context she revealed had cast real doubt on Donnelly's account. The prosecutor's stiff posture spoke volumes, and Judge Keyes pronounced the obstruction charge dismissed. Naomi did not smile or rise. She absorbed the justice delivered with a quiet strength she had honed over weeks of study. Stepping into the Arizona sunlight afterward felt different, brighter, sharper, as if the world had been dialed up a notch. Her mother, Patrice, waited at the courthouse steps, arms crossed like she was bracing for a storm. When Naomi reached her, they embraced in a hug that said more than words ever could. D'Angelo Ruiz and his mother joined them, and D'Angelo whispered, "You nailed it in there." Naomi simply replied, "I did what I had to do." A reporter hovered with a notebook, but Naomi shook her head gently and walked on, her victory too personal for soundbites. In the week that followed, Naomi's story spread across Phoenix. The video she recorded became part of an official complaint, and Officer Donnelly was placed on administrative leave while Internal Affairs opened a review. Community members spoke on panels about teen rights and police oversight. School board members questioned the role of police officers in classrooms. Gifts arrived at Naomi's door, scholarship offers, mentorships from Black attorneys, mock trial programs. But she turned them down, focused instead on ensuring the record would stand for every kid forced into silence. Critics still argued she should have stayed quiet, accused her of provoking an officer doing his job. Yet for every voice condemning her, two others rose up in support. At Roosevelt High, the halls felt different. Students asked sharper questions in civics class, teachers encouraged debate rather than dismissal, and a sense of possibility replaced uncertainty. Naomi had changed the tone of her school simply by refusing to be invisible. Then one afternoon, Mr. Kirkwood, her history teacher, slid a manila folder across his desk. "I pulled some strings," he said with a grin. Inside was an Arizona State University summer program application. Law exposure, mentorship, mock court sessions, for only 20 students. Her name was already on the list. Naomi scanned the details, then looked up and asked, "Why me?" He leaned back and said, "Because you turned a binder and a camera phone into justice." That night at home, Naomi sat at the kitchen table with a blank page before her. No notes, just silence. She wrote in tidy letters, "They thought I came to defend myself." On the next line she added, "But I came to expose the truth." The words felt immense, marking both an end and a beginning. Naomi Brooks did not know what her future held, but she knew she owned her story. She had faced a man who saw her as nothing more than a troublemaker, who used his power to silence a teenager's protest. She had trained herself before sunrise, memorizing statutes under poor lamplight, and rehearsing each sentence until her certainty could not be mistaken for anger. When the moment came, she stood tall, binder in hand, camera phone ready, and showed that justice often starts with someone no one expected. Her victory was more than a legal win. It was a reminder that change can begin at the bottom, that knowledge and courage can topple prejudice. Naomi proved that real strength can be quiet, that brilliance does not need a title, and that one determined voice can demand a nation's attention. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, because sometimes the most powerful justice is the justice we carry ourselves.